day, dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. We're sitting down, me and Tay. We're going to chop up some more mental mindset, chop some things up. I actually had some, where I kind of want to start. We'll see where the combo goes, Tay. But
Okay.
One of the things that was kind of on the top of my head was, it was actually interesting. I think it'll be a good combo with you is, obviously there's been talk, and I think that at a high level, it's starting to be understood that, like this participation trophy type mindset and what things go along with that. Because I think there is this belief I get, like, again, when you think about mental health and like how we should talk to one another and all these other things, I think it can get lean towards this like lovey-dovey, everybody should win. There should be, adversity's the devil, this like very go down too far down that side. And, I actually was having a conversation with somebody on Twitter yesterday, and he made a comment to somebody else about, I think the exact wording was, I don't want to live in a world, or I don't want to be, basically I don't believe in telling athletes that they have flaws, is kind of where his mindset was at. And, I again, along with that, is just like, first off, that tells me a lot too. I immediately go, okay, well, what's the coach's experience where he's projecting onto, again, where he had flaws or he wasn't enough, or all those other things that obviously are probably wrapped in somebody's philosophy of why they believe what they believe along with it. But I thought it would be an interesting combo for us to have because, for lack of a better way, I would say that I made best friends with adversity. It went the other way. I'm a big believer in adversity and have a very different mindset on adversity. So I wanted that to kind of be more of the conversation today, was more around that thought process of maybe going too far down that route.
Right. No, I think, gosh, there's so much to unpack there. And also, too, like adversity at different levels of sport, right? Mm-hmm. Because the adversity that you're going to see in your, 6U, 8U, 10U, 12U is going to be very different. Yeah. The way that it's comprehended, right? The way that you are actually experiencing those moments. And I think somehow, some way, society has turned the page on being so hesitant to hurt someone's feelings, which by all means, I'm all about, like, being mindful, and being aware, sure. And not, trying to direct attack at the little kid.
But not to the point of
giving them
delusion.
False reality.
Yeah, delusion, where it's like, I'm not going to even be honest with you because I might hurt your feelings. Like, there's, again, right. There's a way to communicate. There is a way of, again, especially intentionally, where it comes into being mindful of, like, again, you're talking to a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, like understanding the context of all that situation. But at the same time, it doesn't mean letting them do whatever the hell they want to do, and right. Like they want ice cream every meal, and that's okay. Well, I don't want to hurt your feelings until you know. So, again, going that side, I think, is obviously too where the correction is like an overcorrection there as well, and like also a lack thereof of knowing how to communicate hard things, especially hard truths. And again, like the old saying, right, is sometimes the truth hurts. And again, like that being a real thing. And again, obviously, it does lead to the conversations of how you're having those conversations, all the context, all the things that go along with it. But I do think, again, like you're saying there, is that there's a point where it can become, you could be pushing like false affirmations, and especially during a developed mind, that's right. Also detrimental to that athlete as well, or person. It doesn't matter if it's sports or not, right? It's detrimental to someone's growth to continually be feeding them false affirmations in the search for, I think at one point, I think why it might have turned that way was in the belief system of like, well, we want them to be confident,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then, yeah, but what is true confidence? Is it living your own delusional reality, and to get to a point where it leans into like arrogance, when the sense of not having social awareness and not actually having awareness in the sense of where your skill sets are in one area, another, and I deserve all these things because of X, you know, because I was on the team, so I do deserve, you know, the first place trophy or whatever that looks like.
Right. And I think there's a big difference in confidence when it begins to lead into entitlement.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we feed our athletes, you know, these false realities, and, you know, we tell that player like, "Oh, man, you're the best one on the team. You're the greatest. You're the best I've ever seen."
Yeah.
It's like, well, in the grand scheme of athleticism,
Yeah.
what is your definition of best?
Mhm.
What is your definition of success? What is your definition of all these different things that we accumulate to being the best one on the team? Oftentimes, you know, you'll see the kids. I've seen different athletes at different levels. I've seen the athletes that after they get, you know, 3 errors, they're done. They want to go home. They don't want to participate, and that's it. I've also seen the flip side of that, where you have those athletes that don't stop until they've accomplished what they were out there to do. Two very different mindsets there, and at different stages of development, you are creating different habits and different routines. Now, you know as well as anybody else, I came from a family of coaches and a family of athletes, and there was no free dubs where I come from.
Yeah.
You know, there's no free dubs in my house.
Gotta earn this dub.
Yeah, you got to earn this win. You know, like, and to this day, like, I'm not just going to let you win. I want you to know what it feels like to earn it. I want you to know what hard work looks like. And I do find the feedback in the failure. You know, on our first podcast, we talked about all the different, events that I had perceived as a failure growing up, and all the feedback that gave me. And now you'll hear a lot of people say, a lot of coaches at these, you know, in professional organizations even say that pressure is a privilege and failure is feedback. And, you know, often even you talk about how open are you to feedback, because your hour session with someone isn't going to be telling them, "Oh man, you're really good at this. You're crushing it. You're doing great. You're this and you're that, and you're all these positive affirmations." Like, look, nobody goes to the doctor when they're feeling great. Nobody goes to get tested when everything's going groovy. Like, when you go see the doctor, there is something wrong, and you have to be open to that feedback and open to opening up that awareness, and kind of, you know, being open to seeing those blind spots.
Yeah. No, and I think, you know, obviously a big piece that's, you know, there for them to like unpack is like, hey, like, you know, again, if you are, again, like, if you're preparing someone to go into the real world, their boss is not going to sit there and go, "You're the greatest, you're the most in this company. You deserve the same amount of money as this person, even though you bring our company way less money," right? That first off, from a government system, right, where you come into that, and again, you look at government systems as it's leadership. It's the same thing too, how they're leading a massive group of people, right, and providing guidance and uplifting everybody, yada yada yada, and how you build the economy around these things. It's not. It's been proven now, even too, where we try to dip our toe into this area as well. Is, for example, like, if you are to, one thing that, you know, achievers, hard workers, people that are constantly like overcoming a lot of these things as well, is, you know, there is a detrimental effect to those achievers when there is no positive, there is no reward to working harder. There is no reward to achieving things and pushing the envelope and busting through adversities and all these things. Well, then why would I do it? Right? And it doesn't mean, now also too, I don't want to err on the side of that. It's like, again, if you're doing all these things, and again, your own stuff to unpack here, if you're doing all these things because you're looking for affirmation from all these people and external sources and all this other stuff, you can say one thing and say, well, you know, again, I would flip-flop it the other way. Well, then why are we giving trophies, right? If you want to corner people that are like that and say, oh, well, yeah, but if they need to get over their own stuff, if they need rewards and they're so insecure about somebody else getting an award, well, yeah, but why are you giving the reward to somebody else? is so that they, from an external source, are now getting fed, positive affirmations and all these other things. And there's nothing wrong with those things. I understand the thought process behind building confidence and, hey, you can do this. And again, like, just keep trying. It's like, it's more important about how hard you're working. And again, like that you're trying to discover and trying new things and blah, 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 blah. And all this, like, okay, that's one thing. It's a whole nother thing when someone, again, blatantly is doing something wrong, right? Or from the other standpoint is, again, the kid doesn't strike out and I write in the book that he hit a home run, right? Like, you struck out and it's okay that you struck out. We teach them that it's okay that you struck out, not that this is what we want, this is the final outcome, right? But learning how to use that feedback, right, to, again, develop an awareness about what's going on, right? And also, too, to actually put a real reward behind what that W actually means and what that championship actually means. And so, even there's already been a dilution because there's so many things that you could win, right? Back in the day, let's say like little leagues or something like that. Even in Vegas, right? There was, only a couple little leagues when it first started, right? Like Vegas was a lot smaller. There's going to only be a couple little leagues. And so, like, winning, or first off, being on the all-star team was a big deal.
Sure.
Right? Because there's less teams to be on, right? And also, too, along with that, like, you're competing where there wasn't a whole bunch of club ball teams all over the place. Little league was the ish, all right? Like, it was the business, right? And, now that's not there for, and I know in some parts of the country it still is, but in large, again, club ball is taken over, majority. But, now even with that, right, club ball, right, there's a tournament every weekend. And also, too, it's like who you're playing against. And there's certain tournaments that are like the big ones, along with it. And like getting wins from there is so important. But again, like at every tournament you go to, there's trophy, a belt, a ring, this, that, right? There's all these other things going into that. And again, I'm not against like there being rewards for, winning things. Like one of the things I used to constantly say when I was coaching high school is constantly I'd go, we would have this thing where we would play these little games. We'd compete throughout, practice. And I would always say, like, it pays to be a winner, pays to be a winner. And I'd put something behind that, right? So again, like we'd be doing a bunting drill. One team would win. Great. The other team's got to do something like, hey, you guys are doing the field after whoever lost, like you guys are doing the field after, the game. You guys, the other team, like they're getting the reward of, hey, you guys come, 10 minutes earlier to practice and, I'll hit with you guys extra, or you guys will have an extra round of BP, or, whatever that is, right? Or again, they don't have to do conditioning at the end, or, whatever that looks like, right? And so, we would constantly, do that where it's like I would constantly tell them like, hey, it pays to be a winner, it pays to be a winner, it pays to be a winner, and reinforcing that like in their head that like, hey, like, developing that competitor in them. And, also with that as well is like providing real feedback, like, hey, like, again, when we face the other team, they're trying to beat you. Like, they're not rewarding you like, your coach might be in practice, even though, again, if that's your mindset, that, well, I'm not going to tell you where your flaws are, or, again, there's this delusional mindset. And even, too, I want to also state this as well. When you call it into the open like this and you talk about it, I think largely majority of people would be like, I see that. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do, blah, blah. But sometimes subconsciously, that could be the culture you're creating by not teaching, it pays to be a winner, and going the opposite way where, hey, no matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you do X, Y, and Z, no matter how much sacrifice you make in these other areas, no matter if you strike out 4 times today or you hit 4 home runs today, all these other things, everything is equal across the board. And again, when it comes into that other side, and I think there's a very important piece that we have to separate here is that you have to, again, we go back to the identity thing. Again, along with that, just because you went 0 for 4, it shouldn't affect your identity. Just because you were 4 for 4 home runs, it shouldn't affect your identity. And that's where it comes into the same thing. It's like, you're not a lesser human being, right? It's just awareness when this particular skill. And if you have identity in who, like, in the game, and your life is going up and down based on your wins and losses, or based on how your business is doing, or based on your batting average, or based on how many errors you have, or based on all those other things, and again, it's not to say, again, along with it, of course, there's going to be emotions. Of course, again, the same thing, like, too, I used to tell myself as well, like, again, like, I'll give myself, like, I struck out or whatever, I'll give myself 10 seconds. I'll give myself, I used to do that, like, okay, I'm going to be frustrated for 10 seconds or whatever those things are. Okay, I'm going to feel those feelings that I'm happening, because again, of course I want to win. Of course it's frustrating when you don't win, X, Y, and Z.
Right.
That he struck you out on the slider, right? Or that, you swung in the ball in the dirt, or you popped it to the catcher, or whatever it was, right? You crushed a ball and the guy makes a diving play and catches the ball. Like, of course, again, along with that, like, I get the frustration. But again, there's a point where it can slip into delusion. And that's where you definitely don't want to be promoting that side.
Right. And I think it's exactly what you say. It's we're identifying ourselves in the error. And often there's, that sense of embarrassment. Oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed. I just messed up. Or, everybody's worst nightmare. You missed that ball and it's a grand slam now and you're that guy. But ultimately, again, it's like you said, okay, after 10 seconds, after my emotions are done, what is my response and how do I feel?
Yeah.
And that's what makes great athletes.
Yeah,
How quickly can you recover?
No, and literally exactly what you said I wanted to say there was one of my coaches used to say this as well, and it's something that I took in. It's like, I used to say, like, okay, well, after your emotions, then what? Right? After your emotions calm all down, and again, maybe it's 10 seconds for you, maybe it's 10 hours, maybe it's 10 days, maybe it's 10 months, maybe it's 10 years, right? Whatever that is, right? Maybe it's 10 decades, right? Oh, no, you're still here on Earth, right? But, again, along with that, right, it's like, okay, at some point, these emotions are going to fade. Now, you could take 10 hours, you could take 10 days, you could take, 10 years, right? And, again, all that. But at some point, you're going to have to make a decision. And some point, you're going to have to respond. And you can either let that be here in the next 10 seconds, or you can let that be in effect the next 10 years. But at some point, you're going to have to make a decision anyways. So, again, you can sit here and be mad and all these other things. But, again, I always used to bring up, too, as well. It's like, okay, great. You're mad, all these other things. But, like, again, for example, like, you're in the box, swing and miss at a pitch that you shouldn't have swung at, it's the dirt, whatever, right? And you step out, oh, what an idiot, blah, 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 you knew he was going to throw that, da, 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 blah, 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 and then you step back in the box. And then I talk to my hitters, and I'm like, did that help you? All that talk, all that frustration you just had, all those, did you make any adjustment? Did you spend any time between pitch to pitch actually taking that and, again, making an adjustment before you step in the box? And does it really help you? And also, too, again, like we go back into, like, again, are you being a good friend to yourself? Again, you sit there as well. You get up in the box. You're an idiot. Blah blah blah. All this self-talk that you're constantly. If you swung and missed in the dirt, and then one of your friends is like, "Bro," from the dugout, "Bro, you're an idiot. Why would you swing at that?" Blah blah blah. It's like, bro, isn't that being a good friend to you, right? So you're definitely not being a good friend to you. And also, too, to be aligned for actually making an adjustment, actually going back into the box is like, how did you spend that time, right? And again, after your emotions, isn't what you're going to make an adjustment, you go back in the dugout, that'd be awesome. It's better than not making one for the next 10 at-bats, right? But it's still the same thing, too, as well. It's like the best athletes make the adjustments and make that decision and learn from that awareness, quicker and quicker.
Right.
And the faster you can do that, again, the better you can perform as an athlete, too,
Well, and as I've had the opportunity to see you work with a lot of players now at this point, one of my favorite questions that you ask is, what did you feel there? Because I think that rolls into so many different things. What did I feel there? What did I feel emotionally? What did I feel physically? Because a lot of times when we can pause and recognize, you know what, that did make me upset. What did I feel there? That did make me upset. Why? You know what? My body didn't move the way that I intended to. Why? There's very, the direct correlation there with physical and emotional things happening at once. That question to me is huge. The what did you feel there?
Yeah, and it's a big reset question, right? Immediately, I break your thought process. You're like, again, like, dang it, you suck. Why'd you do this? Like, blah blah blah, whatever that is, right? Like, it's a reset question to go. Okay, stop all that. right? Because I've been asked a question now, and I have to now direct and give an answer to this question. And again, like, well, what did you feel there? Like, okay, well, again, for example, a lot of times, is usually on the ball that like they miss hit or something like that. Or on the opposite end, another thing, sometimes I can help them repattern how they're giving themselves feedback, because what they may consider as a L or a failure or a
Sure.
bad rep or whatever that is, I may perceive as a W, right? And progress and all these other things. And so a lot of times I have to point that out to them, is I'm like, hey, that was a really good rep. You made an adjustment there. Your timing was just different. And just because, again, like you did take a step in the right direction, this still is progress that actually was, again, now let's do it again on this rep. Let's do a couple, like again, and because that's the other part as well, is like one of the things I also, go with them is to talk through that is like, hey, if you made progress and you made an adjustment there, and that was a really good thing, and then you're telling yourself and you're telling your brain that that wasn't good, well, your brain doesn't want, again, your brain and your it's trying to avoid the pain, right, of failure or whatever that is at all cost, right? So when it does that, it's like, I don't want to do that again, because again, I got punished when I moved that way, when I did this X, Y, and Z, right? And emotionally, it's like almost battling with yourself there is now. And then also too, for instance, the brain and its connection with like your CNS system and all the other things that are happening now, also too, your CNS system and all those things want to fire one way, but you're having like, it's like stop and go traffic. Like you want to do this, but then your brain told you not to, and then now you're like in this in between space, and you don't have clear direction, obviously, of like what you want to do. And again, because the communication is so flawed, it's like the body again. It's like, well, I moved better this way, right? Like it was more efficient, the joints were better, like everything else moved well, like biomechanically was better, all those things. But emotionally, I felt the opposite. I felt like that was a terrible rep, and that can be very confusing as feedback. And that's where I feel like a coach is really important there, is to be able to point out that feedback. And I think, again, where that comes into like your personal life, let's say you just as a human, right, is that we do this in our lives all the time. We for example, I gave this story, and I talked about like, again, like how I was kind of talking to myself as you start to make adjustments. And I think one thing, Taylor, I know you and I have talked about this, is like, as you get older, right, you're going like, let's say it's your physical health and decisions and habits and things that you're building, and at some point it can start to look like like this Mount Everest, right? There's all these things I need to do, and the list gets longer every day, and I'm not measuring up, and it's like the weight, starts coming down. And then it's like, dude, I don't even want to take a step because I'm not making it up that mountain. I don't have the effort right now to climb this mountain. I can't even think about trying to climb this mountain right now. I feel more comfortable. I might as well just stay here. Like, why should I try if I know I'm going to fail anyways? All these other things, right? And so where that gets broken is like the same thing is like, I remember just one random morning, I woke up. I told myself before I went to sleep, like I was going to get up and go on the treadmill for like 20 minutes. Like when I wake up, hey, I wanted to start building this routine. Speaking of that, I'm thinking about this even recently too, is just like, hey, okay, if I can't make it to the gym this morning, like I woke up late, all these things happen, whatever, or I have to get to work early tomorrow. I'm like, there's no way I can go all the way to the gym. Like that's a 2-hour process. Like I again, along with it, I only have like 20 minutes, and I can go to my local gym right here at my, my apartment or whatever, and then come back. Right. And that's all I got. And so I woke up that morning, like I went to the treadmill, like I'm walking on the treadmill, and I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to myself, but I'm like monitoring my self-talk. And I got aware of it, and I'm walking, and I'm like, what I was saying to myself, I'm like, good for you, man. Like you got up, like came and you got on the treadmill, like again, along with it, like, maybe it's like, because you talk about this. I always have this battle where I'm used to training like an athlete. So small thing, it's like, it's either I have to go everything or nothing. Like it's like, it's like, well, why didn't I even show up today? Like, well, because I did some cardio. Like it's hard for me to think about going to the gym and only doing cardio. It's hard for me to think about, oh, I'm going to only go on the treadmill for 20 minutes and I'm going to be done today. Like it's like, it's either got to be a 2-hour workout or I don't want to go. Right. Or, whatever that is. Not 2 hours. I'm not that.
That was back in our prime.
Jarrell's
crazy.
Yeah. But it is a 2-hour commitment usually, at least that, right? If not longer, again, with drives back and forth and the whole things. And then recovery and the shower and the food and the blah, 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 and all the things that go into actually going to the gym. It's not just the time frame of just being there, right? So, you go into those other things. And again, I think along with that is like, that's an exact representation where like I caught myself, and then I caught myself because I was talking to myself that way. Then I patted myself on the back for how I was talking to myself. So I got 2 dubs there, being like, one, I was rewarding that. And then I also was like, and it's progress, how you were talking to yourself instead of saying, yeah, well, you got up this morning, but at the same time, you're not lifting. You're only doing 20 minutes on the treadmill, blah, 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 blah. And then guess what? Tomorrow I don't wake up and go on the treadmill, right? Now I don't do any of that, right? Where instead, if I stay on that same progress and I keep doing that, and I'm just waking up, just showing up, just showing up, just showing up. Today it was 10 minutes. 15 minutes. You know what? I can go today, but I only got 10 minutes, you know? And again, building that routine and how important the habit, and again, along with that, there's a lot of books from the psychology side of like habitual patterns and those other things. It's just like, just the habit of waking up and prioritizing the gym. Even if today's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 45 minutes, all those other things, that's way more important over the longevity of what that does for your body and what that does, you know, mentally and all the things. There's so many studies out about what it does for your mental health for like,
sure.
you know, working out and like what it does, you know, again, from a chemical standpoint, physiology, all these other things, how important that is. And then also too, when you get into like soul, heart conditions, all these other things, and also confidence wise, where it's like keeping commitments to yourself, all, you know, again, all of these things that all come in, how important all that is. But I think it's just so important there for, again, exactly there is I could be taking a step in the right direction. Like I woke up, I went to the gym, and then immediately I could be beating myself down when in reality, again, a good coach there, just like I was doing to myself. But again, at one point I might have needed somebody to step in and go, hey, like, but good for you, man. Like you got up, like, look for you, blah, 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 blah. And again, encouraging that same pattern. And again, yeah, you know what? And I'm slowly am going to push you. You know, maybe can it be 25 minutes instead? Can we wake up a little bit earlier? Maybe, you know, again, what can we go to sleep slightly early? What is that? You know, and again, and slowly pushing at the same time. But in the same way, like recognizing and giving merit to the progress of a pattern change or a new habit of forming, you know, mindset or whatever that is, how important that is for
sure.
from a psychological standpoint.
For sure. And the, you know, the root is that instant gratification has become what everybody wants.
Yeah.
I want it now, and I want it when I want it. When in reality, sometimes you have to get to 5 minutes before you can get to 10. You have to get to 10 before you can get to 20.
Yeah.
You have to spar, you know, 2 minutes 5 times
5 push-ups
before
10
you can
push-ups,
do
15 push-ups,
exactly
20 push-ups. Yeah.
Exactly. And the more you can create these small achievable goals, the more you'll be able to soon create these bigger goals. Right?
Have you seen that image? We'll do it during post production. Cody, do it. Is the image of the 2 ladders, and there's one ladder like they're standing at the bottom. There's 2 people standing at the bottom, and there's a wall that they have to climb. And in the analogy, on the one ladder, the steps are really far apart, and he can't even reach the first one to grab it to get started. And on the other ladder, there's little steps the whole way, and how important it is to set these little goals to get started, and also too to get to the next step and what progress actually looks like, rather than these big jumps, you know, these dramatic massive changes, or again, like to even reach the first step, and also too all the risk it takes to try to jump to the next part of the ladder, rather than these small progressional small things. And again, like as you're saying that's like literally the image that popped in my head. But go ahead, proceed.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. Sometimes it does take a lot of small steps to be able to take those bigger leaps. And like you said too, when you get to those bigger leaps, there's typically some risk involved. And with all those repetitions, now you've built up some confidence there, right? And you have an easier time choosing to be confident because of all the reps that you've had.
Yeah, no, it's big there. And definitely, like, I think the same thing there is, again, like coming back to that original point, like there's even a place where that can become delusional to a point. And this is what I mean by that. Like the blind side of this can be too. Sometimes I can make the slightest step in progress and want to give myself way too big of a reward, right? Like, oh, I went to the gym today. Okay, great. I'm going to smash these 12 donuts. I got you, Jay. But like, you know, like these other things, right? Like, again, and that's what I mean by that, right? Where like the reward is like, oh, okay, well, I took this. Okay, well, now I'm going to counter by giving myself so much of this opposite thing. Or, you know, again, maybe it's a drug addiction. Maybe it's, you know, again, something as well. Like, well, you know, even in your relationships wise, like, hey, like, because again, it can be, let's say like, you know, even like I've seen this happen a lot and I'm going to use a drastic analogy, but then bring it back home. Is the drastic analogy is like, let's say like an abusive, like verbally abusive relationship, right? A verbally abusive relationship, it's very manipulative to be like, well, yeah, but at least I didn't do this time. And I'm like, yeah, but you still, and maybe it's mixed with physical, like you still hit me. Right? You're great. You didn't call me this. You didn't name call me, but you still hit me. Right? Like that step in marginal progress is, again, there is steps here, again, contextually to bring back in and bring it back home and flesh it out for a coach is, for example, like how you're talking to your players, right? You're right. Yes, there might be this progress, but there is times where there needs to be a hard stop. Like there needs to be a hard stop, and what you're doing is not okay. Right. And how it affects other people and how you, these things, that marginal progress. And that's where I think the delusion is also very important is like, for example, I've said this too with like employees, right? Or, again, like a player that, for example, they might have 1 year to play and that's all the league is really going to give them. And it's either they make it or they don't. So these marginal progress is like, hey, what you're doing, like I get it that you're waking up 20 minutes earlier, doing like for you as a professional athlete and the requirement that's along with it, your progress doesn't match up and these things do not co-align. And again, along with it, like this plan is not, and at this progress rate, we are in a bad spot.
Right.
And as an employee, sometimes what I'll do, when I have these conversations, of being like, yeah, like, hey, you are making progress. You have gotten better, but at the same time, again, we did make a plan by this date that you were going to be here, X, Y, and Z. There is a production level and what it does to the business, how it affects every other person, all these other things contextually. So because I can see, and I know that you've seen this more than most, especially too, coming from the field that you come from, is this hold on to marginal progress, right? Where they have taken steps, but at the same time, it's like minimal, like, and it's like, great. Okay, I'm happy you're doing some of these things. And again, I don't want to devalue those. Those are still valuable, but at the same time, within context of the things that are going on, it's not a cop out, to lapse on your responsibilities or lapse on your mindfulness of other people and all these other things. There is a time and a place where there does need to be hard boundaries, hard changes, hard turnarounds. And I do think that contextually needed to be added as well, because some people will say that as well. It's like there is a time and a place, and dependent on situations where, you do need to have what does progress look like, and this goal setting, what is that next step where it's like, am I moving forward, a centimeter here, right?
Right.
Or again, is this, I'm taking a foot in that direction. Well, that's good because, again, for example, let's say you take the Mount Everest idea, right? Okay, if I move forward a centimeter, centimeter by centimeter, but again, also the centimeters take years to do and all these things, like, yeah, you're right. I'm not saying you haven't progressed in the last 10 years, right? But what I am saying that it's been minimal, right? And there's awareness and realness of delusion that's still wrapped into that reality as well,
Well, and you used one of my favorite words there, was alignment, and co-alignment is what you said. But goal alignment in itself truly does require so much detail and what you actually want to accomplish, because there needs to be those measurable items. If you say you want this, but you're doing this, then do you really want it? How bad do you want it? If you really want this change, then what are you willing to do? And what consistence does, like, what does your consistency look like? Because consistency really is key. What can you do over and over and over to get to this goal that you won't get bored with? Yeah. And as long as you continue to make those strives, then that shows some passion. That shows some actual true desire towards that. See, a lot of people don't know, moving backwards and kind of into a circle where we came from, but Shaquille O'Neal was kicked off his high school basketball team. But obviously he grew to be Shaq. Had that adversity, had that negative self-talk, had him stop trying just because of that, what would that have looked like for him as an athlete?
Yeah. No, it's big. Yeah, no, and I mean, you truly see, it doesn't matter if it's a business or whatever that is, right? Like, there is again, go build an Amazon without
Mhm.
any adversity. They literally had so many problems from a packing standpoint and by distribution that they literally built their own delivery process. Like, name another business that is doing
Mhm.
that, right? And again, I would say the same thing too. Like, I often, my brain slips into all these places, like business wise. I think, I forgot what it was, a couple weeks ago, I was thinking about that as just like, think about the first time a pizza place said they could deliver. You're like, that's hype, right? Like the first plate, like, cause think about it. Back in the day, what do you get delivery?
Yeah.
Pizza. Now you got DoorDash and you got Uber Eats and all these other things where you could get food, right? Well, back in the day, right? It's like, man, we got to go get food. All this other thing that wasn't even an option. And then on top of that, like as well, it's like I bet the first time somebody in Iowa or something, right, pops on the thing, we deliver. People were like, bro, they were probably like, yeah, and then you got to figure out a way, right? How do we get the food there, right? Do
Yeah.
we have like the business? Like, do we invest in cars and have them, or what
Right.
does that look like? And then they figure out like innovation, right? They
Mhm.
slap the little magnet, suction cup things, whatever. I don't even know how they secure it to the car. I have no idea, but it sticks on there, right? And they drive you over your pizza, and then well, shoot, now the pizza's getting cold. Well, you know what? We got a pizza thing. We got to slide it, and this keeps it hot, right? And then again, the
Right.
same thing too. And it's like, all right, well. And then how are we going to build these cultures, and then again we got to market this, right? And then it gets on, and then all the competition's like, well, then now, hey, that guy's delivering, so now we got to deliver, right? So now we got to do all these other things, and like how that drives like all these things. And I think it's so again interesting when you do all these things together. It's like if you want to achieve anything great or anything worth having, like again, the whole thing is that old saying, easy come, easy go,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And again, that sounds such an easy statement, but like really think about that. Like the things that come easy, right, and that are easy to obtain, like one, most people have, right, and two, on top of that, like it's very easy for that to stop coming in, right? Like for example, from a business standpoint, you look at that from they talk about in business structure building width versus depth,
Mhm.
and what that actually looks like. Width, usually a company that it builds width is wide, but not very deep
Mhm.
in where that they are. And so because of that, they can make a lot of money quick. But the depth and the time in the market and all those other things, you can see flash in the pan, like there's companies that make 5 million in 1 year, and then the next year they're out of business.
Right.
Right. And then there's companies that again had made 30,000 the first year, 200,000 the next year, 500,000 the next year, 2 million the next year, right? And it's slowly over thing. And then also too, again, there's so much depth of what's been built over time where again, like for example, like Amazon isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Right.
Walmart isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Right.
All these things, again, like they've built depth, right? Again, for example, COVID can hit, they're fine.
Mhm.
Right? They have depth. They're not just width where they're only making money in one way, one fashion, and also to even maybe how they're making money. It's all dependent on this one thing, right? And so again, if it takes away, if that's not, for example, let's say you have a brick and mortar business where everything's in person, right? Like they have to come and purchase from you. Well, something like COVID's going to destroy you, right? Because and again, adversity, right? And the best businesses like find a way to overcome it. Like I remember restaurants around here, right? Restaurants, you couldn't eat inside. Well, great. They set up tents outside. They did a little fake enclosure, and then all of a sudden that was allowed, or whatever that was, right? Where again, to do these things is like the mindset that it comes with being one of my favorite books too. If you haven't read, and if you know me, like why it so aligns. There's a book called Grit
Mhm.
and Nasty. I love that book, right? But like it's again the same thing too about how these elite performers, like there's a test you can take of your grit score that they came up with basically. And again, along with that is that when they had all these high performers and all these different fields, they all scored really high in grit. And I would also tie into that grit, like resourcefulness, right? Like how good they are at figuring out, how to do things, how to do a lot with a little, right? And then keeping that and figuring out how to overcome adversities over and over and over again, like as they went. And so, again, for example, like that, like, how important that is. And that's why I think like it's really a disservice it's a really disservice as a coach or as a parent, as a friend, as all these things to try to rob people of adversity and trying to make everything a cakewalk. And I mean, and let's go back and tell you how we're not meant for that is the same thing with the human body, right? Like if you give it zero stress, like you get really unhealthy. Like it needs stress. It's like the yin and yang, right? Now, again, that old thing we talked about, like you stress it too much, you're going to have breakdown. But you don't stretch it enough and it has atrophy. And when you have atrophy over time, what it does to your immune system, what it does to your brain, what it does to your mental health, what it does, all these other things, like we're not meant to be still. We're not meant to sit in a bed and be watching, TVs and all these things. Like, again, when people go into comas, like there's massive issues of what happens to your body when it's not moving, like stagnant water, like we talked about. Like it's so important for us to have a degree of stress. Right. And so if we try to remove all stress and we try to make everything as comfortable as possible, and that's where society and that ideology is like, as a business and as all those other things, you're trying to make it so easy that, why wouldn't they go with you? Right. But at the same time, they can start to warp your brain that you actually want nothing to overcome. Right. And in reality, what a business really should be doing, or again, all these things that are happening in the world, it shouldn't be, well, the stress that, like, for example, let's say back in the day, right? Well, I wanted to rent a movie, right? Well, okay, well, to rent a movie back in the day, we're going to go to Blockbuster, do something like that, right? I gotta go drive over there. I gotta, go through the section, look at the movies, blah, blah, blah. I haven't seen a trailer on this. Is this good? I don't know. I'm going to read the back of the thing. Back in the day, y'all didn't know about this. You young bucks are listening to this. Y'all don't know about this game. We just had to read the back and guess if it was good. And hopefully it was good, and we'll see. All right. So you get the movie, whole thing, boom. You drive back home, all the stuff. Okay. Well, now, again, like Amazon, right? Oh, I want Amazon Prime. I want to watch that movie. Great. I know if I search on Amazon, I'm going to watch it. It's only a couple bucks. I don't have to worry about returning the movie. I don't got to worry about. I can watch the trailer. I could do all these other things before I watch it, and then boom, I could watch it right then and there. Don't got to leave the house. Everything's amazing. Now, it's great, technology and all those things that happen. It's great that it removed the adversity that comes with wanting to watch that movie. But along with that, that adversity should be redirected and now spent on other areas, right? We should be taking care of the monotonous things that don't take any creativity, that don't do these other things. Great. If we take away from those other areas, we need to make it in other areas. And again, like the human body, for example, like back in the day, we had a farm. We had to provide for ourselves. We had to do all these other things. Well, what happened is we removed a lot of that stuff where I'm not worried about where I'm going to get my food here today. I'm not worried about, again, if I have, what we're going to eat next week. I'm not worried about any of these things. And that's where it becomes super important there of, again, like as I remove those things, back in the day, I can now redirect that attention and that focus and that stress and put it in other areas, like being elite at sports, rather than having to go farm for food today, or, instead of having to fight for my freedom every day and, go outside with my, my axe and fight somebody, right? Like I can now redirect that energy, but it should be redirected, and it shouldn't be just, again, turn into stagnation and me just, sitting and not doing anything. Right. And that's where we're at threat, especially within American society. Because it's become so easy to survive. And when it's not redirected and it's not those other things, and especially when we just gone through a season, where we went through a season of like COVID where, hey, I'm going to pay you to stay home. And I think more than anybody, like you understand, what that did to so many people with that freedom of I'm going to pay you to stay home and not do anything and not be like this other way, what that can do. And also the dichotomy of what happened through COVID as well is the too much stress and how am I going to pay my bills, and how, again, my business is closing, and, again, there's all this political stuff going on, and, that as well. And you got to see, again, the byproducts of both of those.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we're talking about COVID and all the things that people experienced during that time, gosh, there were so much. Suicide rates skyrocketed, relapse skyrocketed, people, it's almost as if we didn't know how
Oh, so it's not just a theory. Like there was data behind
oh,
these things.
oh,
Things
numbers
happen.
numbers
Yeah.
numbers through the roof.
Mhm.
And it's like, as I was saying, we didn't know how to um be by ourselves. We didn't know how to process alone. We
That's a
didn't
lot of
know
time.
how.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of time to be by yourself and
Yeah.
be with your thoughts.
Yep.
And one of the biggest things in people performing is identifying obstacles.
Yep.
Well, now you've sent people home to identify different obstacles all day long.
Mhm.
And now there's boredom, and a lot of people say, boredom is the devil's playground.
Mhm.
I can think of a lot of different things when I'm bored, right? And
Mhm.
your mind can become a very dangerous place.
Well, and especially too, like self-destruct.
Yeah.
That self-destruction that comes along with, I'm unhappy, but I don't have the awareness to understand why,
Mm-hmm.
and so I start picking
Mm-hmm.
fights.
Right.
So I
And
start doing those things.
and going back to the question, I don't know why, because maybe, just maybe, I didn't take the time up into this point to ask myself, how do I feel now?
Mhm.
Going back to that key question.
Yeah.
How am I feeling and why am I feeling this?
Mhm.
Awareness, I'm telling you, awareness is a superpower,
Mhm.
y'all. Awareness is huge. And for so long, I mean, divorce rates, even too. We weren't spending time with our partners for that long.
Yeah.
I mean, you work 8 hours a day. A lot of us don't realize, but we spend more time with the people that we work with than we do our families at home.
For sure.
And when you're not used to all of that interaction, one, you start getting fatigued. You get mental fatigue and physically fatigued. I like to refer to like interaction fatigue. I'm not used to interacting this long.
Yeah.
So now that's when the grumpy, that's when the attitude, that's
Mhm.
when, start to get tired and all these other things start coming out. And it's funny because you go back to when little kids get tired, they get angry and they throw a tantrum.
Mhm.
Well, adults do the same thing.
It's
Okay?
express it in different ways.
It's expressed in different
Yeah.
ways.
Sometimes the same ways.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
There is times where I want to throw myself on the ground as well, and
For
also
sure.
throw a tantrum. So
For
I get it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's so much to unpack there. My mind's going in so many different places.
I was gonna say the other thing as well is, like, for example, I actually was talking to Darrell about this before it happened. Is please, I'm trying to be sensitive here, but I had a good time during COVID. Like COVID was positive for me. like not that what was going on in the world, but me personally is, again, I used that time. I was in really good shape, right? Like I was waking up in the morning, I was cooking food, I was getting to do all the things that I can't do when life is happening, right? Like I actually got to redirect a lot of that energy, being like, great, I was going to Muay Thai multiple times, a week. I was doing all these other things because I had more time. And so, again, along with that, it's like, yeah, if you use that time and you just become stagnant. But again, on the other side of that, it's like, yeah, like, again, a long time, like, and again, obviously, more than most, like, we're coming over, we're doing workouts at the house.
Yeah.
Like, it was all these things that were happening. And again, like, for me, it was like, COVID was a really positive time. And like, again, I'm like, hey, man, I might need to do this every little while. I was giving myself, a month or something where I can kind of get this reset going, of what that looks like. And I think it's like the same thing as well. It's like, hey, we can be dealt the same cards, but like what we do with it and, how we handle it, how important that is.
Yeah, no, on the flip side of the things mentioned previously, COVID was also a time where people grew the awareness of realizing how much they didn't like their day job.
Yeah, about
right?
to say, that's a big thing.
Entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs also
Popped off.
Hit.
Yeah.
No, suddenly, it's like Susie is knitting,
Yeah.
and Johnny is a personal trainer because he did his online course,
sure.
and meal prepping is big.
I needed a couple months to do what I really wanted to do, and I was getting paid from unemployment while I was doing it, and now it gave me the time to build the business platform that I needed to, and then also too, it also kicked the consumer into a mindset. It also kicked the consumer into a mindset of, hey, I can actually I want to do these things online, and I want to do things
Mhm.
remotely, and we don't have to have a building, and we don't
Yeah.
have to do these things, and I can still get results and
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. And that was a
Mhm.
big thing. And I know for
Yeah.
us as a business, like that really drove people to our online platforms
Mm-hmm.
and our resources because of that, and it gave us some time to really make some things happen. I mean, like the farm blew up during COVID,
Right.
and again, if COVID wouldn't have happened, very unlikely that the farm would be what it is today. Just because again, like it brought investors, it brought all these other things that ended up happening because I had the time to do it.
For sure, for sure. There was so much more time to be creative and be innovative and come up with all these different things that people once didn't have time to do. When you don't have time to think freely and think, for yourself and have your own ideas, when are you going to do those things? And COVID kind of created that time for people to, suddenly build their own businesses and capitalize on that time, which, on the flip side of all the negative, that was awesome.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's just, again, the big, pieces that are like, massive there is just like understanding everything is everything is it could be both sides of the coin, right? And like what you do with it and what you do with that time and what you with any adversity, right? It's
Mhm.
always about the response.
Well, and I was just going to
Everything's
say
about the
again,
response.
how are you processing the adversity?
Mm,
It all comes back to that. And
mm,
to go back to where we first started was robbing the adversity again at such a time of huge negativity going around nonstop, day to day. There was positive responses and there were negative responses, and that's going to be everything.
yeah,
There's always going to be a negative and a positive response,
yeah.
and the more that you can respond positively in
Yep.
different situations,
Mm.
the better you will be.
Well, and again, it gets back to the main point. Okay, like again, if you didn't get, it don't matter who you are, you got kicked by COVID, right? It was a reset. It wasn't exactly what we're going for there, right? It's not like everybody was like, oh, when it comes into obviously what was happening and the things that were all along of what that development looked like from totality of what it did to society. Nobody's wanting that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think it goes back to the main point of when we started with the podcast is that if you're coaching, leading, teaching, all those other things, and you're trying to avoid all this, like this vacuum type ideology that everything was going to be great, and again, it's not going to, it's going to be fine,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're never going to face these things, and you're not teaching the skills what it takes to actually overcome things. As again, you're painting this. You're painting this fake reality,
Yep.
and you're not preparing those that you're teaching, leading, and all those things of how they're going to go about life when things don't go that way. And at some point, instead of learning how to lose when you're 5,
Yep.
right? Instead, you're going to be 22
Yeah.
and 25 and 28 and not knowing how to deal with, and it's going to feel like a bombardment of
Yeah.
overwhelming
Yeah.
because you've never dealt with all these little things and developed the skills that it
Mhm.
takes to actually do those things. And again, you're doing a disservice in that way, even though I think in the moment your instant satisfaction is to, well, I want to make you happy and I want you to be these things and all these other things. But in long term, hey, like my job is to prepare you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm going to love you along the way. It's not abandoning that and saying, let me make your life as hard as you can and all these other things. Like, no, this is out of love and preparation. And again, an alignment for what you're going to be, doing and preparing for life. But again, it goes back to the other place of like understanding that again, adversity is part of life. Overcoming these obstacles is a part of life.
For sure. And like I just want to be on the show.
Say, well, say sorry, code, but it was tanky.
Yeah, he was in and he was out.
Go ahead. Life has adversity.
Yes.
Yeah, you're doing a disservice.
Yes,
that
yes,
stuff, yeah.
yes. And again, you're not always going to win.
Yeah.
Right? You're not always going to win. Exactly like you
What do you
said.
mean?
You can, yeah.
This is the winning team. All I do
Right,
is win, Tay. That's
right.
it.
Look, everyone who may have had an undefeated, streak,
Yeah.
once lost.
Yeah, 100%.
Whether when they were
Mayweather's
younger.
gonna pop in and be like, what?
Right.
What?
Right. Well, everybody too. Everybody was hyped on McGregor, right? When he was undefeated and he was, again, we start throwing the title around him. You're the greatest of all time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then he lost a few times. And then that script changed. Ronda Rousey, she was also undefeated for a minute.
Yeah.
And look what it did
Oh,
to
you're
her
human.
mental health
Yeah.
when she lost for the first time. I mean, that was
It
huge.
dismantled her everything.
Huge, totally dismantled.
Yeah.
And I could go on about that for days. But again, when we're so used to just winning all the time
Yeah.
and being the greatest and not being told about our blind spots and not, in a sense, being held accountable
Yeah.
for those areas where we can grow,
Yeah.
that it does become very overwhelming.
100%.
And gosh, I'm so grateful and I have so much gratitude for all the times I've lost growing up and all the times that I did face adversity.
Not in the moment.
No, not in the moment.
No,
In the
no,
moment, I was
no.
very angry.
100%.
Very angry. Listen,
very upset.
I had a time of being a bad sport, okay?
Yeah,
and I think
100%.
you probably got to witness 9 out of 10 of those moments. Okay. Fortunately for you, right? But also now, as I've grown, as I've mainly honestly got closer to God, I have a lot of gratitude for those moments because it's built that resilience and that being able to be relentless. Because without loss, what is there to be relentless with?
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I think the same thing too is, again, like you said, the appreciation there. It kind of comes back to that common question, right? Of when you could look at it from a faith lens, like a lot of people will ask, well, why do bad things happen in the world and some of those other things as well. And like one of the biggest, things with that is as well as like, hey, like to prepare also too for all of us for the things like, for example, like, again, like I knew from a lens of like, I was looking at people that were hitting and I'm like, bro, I can't do that. I don't move like that. I'm not all these other things. So as a player, right, of course I could have been rewarded with just, being, again, athlete. And yes, I could have impacted that way and all those other things. But like God didn't have that calling for me because I had to learn and I had to look so closely at biomechanics. And I was always in search and I was always wanting that extra inch. And I've always, like, it developed that into my character that, like, that's what made me a good coach. And the same exact thing where I'm getting flipping back, with you in that same way is like, and if you don't know yet, and you might not know, and for a long time, I didn't know, and I was blessed early on in my life to figure out, as well, and like knowing one of the major callings, God that God had on my life. And I think the same thing as well is like, again, along with that is like, hey, like you got to know, again, when one of the statements is like, if you can't see God's hands working, you got to trust his character, is that he has something. He's preparing you for something, right? He's preparing your character for something that he's going to have and ask you to do. And maybe you might not recognize in that moment that, again, everything that was done to prepare you to be that and to be those things. But it is something, as well as like to remember that, like, again, like I get it. Like you're in the storm. You don't want to you don't want to get kicked anymore. Okay, I get it, God. Like I got it. All these other things. But it's like, no, like the same thing too. If you're still here, there's still a lesson to be learned. There's still something, again, there's another skill set to be developed, deepened, all those things. That it's so important that, again, that the impact that's going to come from that adversity. And again, that old, biblical principle, right? Like God uses all evil for good, right? Everything that happens, God wastes nothing, right? He wastes nothing. And so when you go in that same way and it's like nothing is wasted, first off, how beautiful, and again, the craftsmanship that again is to mold the most heinous things, all together, and like how that turns into the beauty that comes out of that, is amazing in that same way. And I think it's just like, again, holding tight to that and saying, hey, I don't know why, but God, I trust you. I don't know why we're going through these things. I don't know why COVID happened. I don't know why my dad died. I don't know, I don't know, especially at a young age and those same things. I don't know why, my dad beat me when I was younger, or I don't know why, like, all these other things, whatever your storyline is, right? I don't know why these things happen. And again, I'm not here to tell you why and try to figure out all the complexities and, and it explains God's plan for your life. Sure. But I do know his character, right? And I do know His word, and how many, again, like he's never not came through for me. And again, if you feel like he's not coming through for you right now, that just means he's not done, right? That there's something on the other side. And again, like hold tight in faith, to his promises.
Yeah, and I'll just throw a little quick good quote in here. In every breakdown, there's a breakthrough.
Hey, on that note, mic drop. We're gonna pray it out and get this going. So let's please join me if you would like. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for bringing us here today, God, and having these conversations, and the reach and what you're going to do with our words, God, and how you continue to work through us and use us as your mouthpieces and to influence the world and push people towards you, God. And we just come to you in gratitude and praise and reflection of all the things and all the ways that you move in our lives. And we just want to thank you, God, and we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, until next time, Farm System out.